At the wedding, the father-in-law laughs and tells the bride, "My son found a woman who's perfect for cleaning the floors and washing the dishes." Sarah was seen by many as too quiet, a woman who went unnoticed in conversations and gatherings. But those who truly knew her understood that her silence hid a depth hard to express. She had a reserved way, speaking softly and walking lightly, yet inside carried a strong consciousness, shaped by everything she had lived through. Coming from a humble family, she grew up on the outskirts, where basic was enough and respect was worth more than any material possession. She lived with her mother in a small, clean house, no luxury but dignity. Raised alone by that mother, a woman who faced life silently, never complaining about battles few saw. From a young age, Sarah learned that expecting recognition was useless. Things were done out of necessity, not for applause. She lost her mother early, still a teenager, and with her, she lost the only true bond of affection she knew. She had no siblings, no uncles or grandparents nearby. She was alone. She had to learn to take care of herself, the house, life. She was taught to be helpful, to not get in the way, to adapt. She spent years between house chores and small jobs, trying to survive without drawing attention. She wrote in notebooks at night, dreaming of other lives that seemed far away. She never had much, but she never stopped wishing for something simple, someone to treat her as an equal, someone she could share the weight of life with, build something real. It was in this state of mind that she met Timothy. He appeared with good manners, polished looks, and gentle words. He worked at a regular company and showed interest in getting to know her, seeming to take her seriously. Sarah, fragile from loneliness and the desire for stability, gave in quickly. She thought she was finally being chosen, but Timothy's family was something quite different from what she could expect. Timothy still lived with his parents, Charles and Sophia, in a large, organized house typical of the upper middle class. On the outside, everything was impeccable. A well-kept garden, neatly hung curtains, preserved furniture, family portraits in the hallways. The appearance was one of order and tradition. But behind this facade was rigidity, prejudice, and control, things Sarah would only understand through living there. Charles was the kind of man who imposed authority in tone and gaze. He spoke as if his words were law. He believed in hierarchy as synonymous with order. For him, everyone had a role, and women's role was inside the house, taking care of what he called the essentials. He never shouted, but made it clear everything must follow his rules, even if he never said them outright. Sophia was more reserved. She spoke softly, moved slowly, and rarely expressed an opinion. Relying on empty smiles and constant obedience, she upheld what Charles demanded: routine, silence, and reputation. She imposed nothing, but also resisted nothing. It seemed she had accepted that living there meant giving up herself. To Sarah, she was almost invisible, but her manner supported everything, and tradition was enforced through her with a quiet weight that suffocated. The relationship progressed quickly. Soon, they were together as a steady couple. Despite the discomfort Sarah felt around his family, still, she remained firm, believing that, over time, she would be accepted. Timothy kept his calm and gentle tone, and that was enough for her to keep going. The marriage proposal came a few months later. Timothy was straightforward, and Sarah accepted joyfully, believing she was finally finding direction. She thought she would now have a home, a stable life, and that everything would fit together. As soon as she said yes, preparations began. The ceremony would be simple, and the reception would take place at his parents' house. Sophia would handle the details, and Charles limited himself to approving the decision with a brief comment. In the week before the wedding, Sarah started going to the house more often. Each visit was an attempt to fit in, to understand the dynamics of that environment where everything seemed rehearsed. Sophia offered coffee with a gentle but never warm smile. Charles asked short, dry questions, and Timothy, always with his calm tone, tried to keep things steady. "You'll see, my father is a bit serious but fair," Timothy said one afternoon while they prepared the invitations on the living room couch. Sarah smiled, pressing her fingers in her lap. "He seems firm, but I think I can adapt." Timothy didn't answer immediately. He just adjusted the invitations on the table and said, almost distractedly, "Here at home, everything has its way, and it's better not to push too much." There was something in that phrase Sarah didn't understand right away, but she kept it. On the wedding day, Sarah arrived wearing the dress adjusted by the neighbor seamstress, her hair carefully tied back and her hands cold. She felt a light nervousness, but hopeful. She was willing to start a new life, believing that love could, little by little, soften the distances. The ceremony was simple, as Timothy wanted. Most guests were from his family. Sarah, without close relatives, brought only a co-worker and an old neighbor. Timothy wore a flawless suit and smiled kindly at her. During the vows, Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. It wasn't exactly joy, but it felt like the end of a weight. Maybe just relief. After the ceremony, everyone went to Timothy's parents' house for a small reception. It was there, in that place that would now also be her home, that Sarah would try to find a space for herself, try to be part of it. The living room was decorated with discreet flowers and a long table full of sweets and snacks. Charles greeted the guests with the air of a satisfied host. Sophia circulated with a plate of cakes, offering without saying much. Sarah stood beside Timothy when she heard what she would later understand as the turning point of everything. "My son knew how to choose," Charles said, raising a glass with a broad smile and easy laughter. "He found a woman good for cleaning the floor and washing the dishes." Some laughed, others looked away. Timothy forced a smile. Sarah froze inside, smiled on the outside, the kind of smile born from embarrassment, the obligation to pretend it was nothing. But inside, something broke. In that phrase from Charles, Sarah understood more than others heard. There was the limit of what was expected of her. It was more than a joke. It was a warning, almost a mark. She smiled outwardly, but inside felt something had settled, as if they placed her in an invisible spot she couldn't leave without consequences. In the days after the wedding, nothing happened abruptly. There was no sudden change in tone or overt behaviors. It was subtle. Sophia kept the same cold politeness, but gradually started including Sarah in small household tasks. "Can you help me separate these clothes for washing?" she said one morning casually. "The basket's already full." Sarah nodded. "Sure," she replied with the same tone, and that's how it started. One day it was laundry, the next, dish towels, then dishes, cupboards, the yard. The chores piled up slowly as if they had always been hers, as if part of an unspoken agreement. "If there's time, clean the area after lunch," Sophia said another day, passing in the hallway. "Today's a good day to defrost the fridge. It's almost full," she commented casually another time. Timothy, for his part, kept the same behavior in the first days. He remained affectionate, but slowly withdrew from small talks. He began making decisions for her without including her. "We're having dinner at my uncle's Sunday, okay?" he said one afternoon. "Did you ask if I wanted to go?" Sarah asked lightly. "It's just dinner, Sarah. No need to complicate," he replied, already looking at his phone. Days later, arriving home, Timothy spoke bluntly. "My mother asked you to make that baked rice they like. She said yours was better than the old cook's." "Did you ask if I could?" she insisted quietly. "No need to ask everything. It's just details," he said, going straight into the bedroom. It was as if he hadn't changed overnight, but calmly revealed who he was when everything seemed under control. There was no aggression, just practical coldness, as if the relationship were a ready-made structure and her role was to fit in. Charles kept his distant stance. He spoke little to Sarah, but always in a way that diminished her. Did the girl fix my armchair? It was out of place. Call the helper, I want to talk to her about Sunday's dinner. He never called her by name. He never spoke directly without a commanding tone. But he didn't shout or threaten. It was all subtle every day. The kind of thing unnoticed by outsiders, but that accumulates inside like suffocating dust. Sarah tried to talk to Timothy. At night, in the bedroom, in a calm voice. I feel like everything here is decided without me, as if I'm just filling a space. Timothy rolled his eyes impatiently. You need to adapt, that's all. Everyone has their role. My mother went through this too. It was always the same argument. And gradually, she began accepting silence as an answer. The house was big, organized, silent, but it wasn't a good silence. It was a silence that constantly said where she could step, what she could say, how far she could go. No one stopped her directly, but everything around restrained her existence. Every gesture was a small frame. Every disguised message a fence. She woke up, made coffee, tidied the house, helped with shopping. She did everything like someone trying to prove herself, but the feeling was always the same. The more she did, the less she was noticed, and the less she was noticed, the more she felt like she was fading away. One ordinary afternoon, she decided to go get the mail. She walked slowly, shoulders low, the sun heavy on her head. She was distracted, her mind full of mental lists, when she heard a soft voice from the neighboring yard. You're the new girl next door, right? Sarah turned slowly. She saw a woman with short grey hair, a light dress, and simple sandals, watering some plants with a thin hose. Yes, I am, Sarah said, trying to smile. I'm Pamela. I've lived here a long time. I hardly ever see you smiling. Sarah tried to smile again, a bit awkwardly. I'm still adapting. Pamela nodded without pushing further. If you want to come by for tea one of these days, the door's open. Sarah thanked her. She went back inside with that phrase quietly hammering in her head. It wasn't just any invitation, it was a crack. In the following days, they began to cross paths more often. At the gate, on the sidewalk, at different times. Pamela didn't insist. Sometimes she just waved. Other times she offered a chair in the shade, no questions asked. Over time, Sarah began to accept. First, she sat for 5 minutes, then she had tea. Finally, she began to talk, always in a low voice, as if still afraid to be heard. Some days I feel like part of the furniture. I do everything expected, but they don't even seem to notice I'm there. Pamela listened, didn't interrupt, waited for the silence to pass before responding. A woman who forgets herself will never be remembered by anyone. Pamela didn't say more that afternoon, but the phrase stuck inside Sarah like an uncomfortable seed. A woman who forgets herself will never be remembered by anyone. Those words spun in her mind for days, stuck in the corners of her thoughts, as if waiting for the right moment to explode. Sarah kept her routine as always, quiet, obedient, doing every chore as if that guaranteed her own existence. But now there was a difference. Inside, something was waking up. That's when, in secret, she began to study. Nothing grand. She didn't want to draw attention. She just started accepting the books Pamela lent her. Old books, borrowed with yellowed pages and worn covers. She read at night when everyone was asleep, with a weak flashlight hidden under the covers, like a teenager hiding a treasure. She jotted down passages in a small notebook, wrote ideas, loose thoughts, questions she'd never asked herself before. Are you taking another one today? Pamela asked, seeing Sarah leave with a book hidden in her bag. Yes, I promise I'll take good care of it. This one looks harder, Sarah said. Better that way. We forget easy stuff fast, Pamela replied, taking a sip of tea. Reading was like rediscovering her own mind. Sarah found herself slowly thinking for herself again. She began dreaming again, even if afraid. Imagined herself far from that house, in a place where she could breathe without apology, where she could be heard, even if only by herself. But along with this small inner reconstruction came a silent blow. She discovered by chance that Timothy was having an affair. There was no fight, no shouting, no confession. One morning, while making the bed, his phone beeped. The screen lit up, showing a message notification. She couldn't resist. She took the device and unlocked it with the code he always used. The conversations were there, open, explicit, messages with intimate nicknames, promises of meetings, laughs that weren't hers. Sarah stood still for minutes. She didn't cry, didn't react. She just felt the ground slowly fall away. Then she returned the phone to its place and went on with the rest of the morning, as if nothing had happened. She cleaned the bathroom, made lunch, served Charles's coffee. But inside, something broke for good. That night, she lay beside Timothy in silence. He fiddled with his phone, distracted. "Good night," she said. "Good night," he answered without looking up. She said no more. She knew nothing she said would change what had to be done. In the following days, she began to watch more closely every time he left, every poorly given excuse, every diverted glance. But she didn't confront him. She swallowed it all with the same coldness the house had taught her. Outwardly, she stayed the same. Inside, she changed for good. She tried to leave for the first time 2 weeks later. She gathered courage and spoke to Timothy in the kitchen. "I'm leaving this house," she said, looking straight at him. Timothy kept cutting bread. "Go ahead. The door's open," he replied calmly. "I want to take my things," she said. Timothy dropped the knife and stared at her. "What things? The house is mine. The furniture is mine. Even the money for what you eat is mine. You want to leave? Leave with the clothes on your back." She stayed silent. Timothy went back to cutting bread. "By the way, you should be thankful. You were accepted here, even with your past. You want to leave on your own and still take stuff." That was the last time he saw her accept that silently. That same day, she looked for Pamela. "I'm leaving, for real this time," she said firmly. Pamela looked her in the eyes. "Do you have somewhere to go?" "No, but I'll figure it out." Pamela nodded. "You won't do this alone." From then on, everything became calculated. Silently, Sarah began gathering documents, hiding money little by little, separating the essentials. With Pamela's help, she found a trustworthy contact, an elderly lady who rented a room in the back of her own house. Someone simple, discreet, who asked no questions. One rainy night, she put everything she had into an old backpack. She left without making noise. Pamela waited for her with an open umbrella at the corner. They exchanged no words. Walked side by side to the gate of the other house. Pamela handed her the room key with a dry gesture. Sarah thanked her with her eyes. The room was small, with a single bed, a peeling dresser and a creaky window, but it was enough. It was hers. For the first time, Sarah locked a door from the inside and felt relief. She breathed like someone relearning. In the following days, she started working at a bakery. A cramped place, smelling strongly of yeast and grease, but with simple people. She washed pans, cleaned floors, worked the counter. The pay was minimum wage, but enough to eat and pay for the room. Almost nothing left over, but she owed no one. She slept exhausted, but in peace. "You look like you slept well," Pamela said when she saw her at the bakery door. "I did, for the first time in a long time," Sarah replied. In the months that followed, she stayed steady. She saved part of the money in a cardboard box hidden in the closet. Continued reading at night, jotting down everything in new notebooks. Learned to do math, fill spreadsheets, use a computer. One day she saw a job ad for administrative assistant at an accounting firm. She didn't think much. Went there with a simple copy of her resume, made with Pamela's help. They interviewed her quickly, asked little. 3 days later, they called her to start. Sarah couldn't believe it at first. "Are you sure?" she asked on the phone. "Yes. Start Monday, 7 a.m., answered the voice. She went to the new job in simple but ironed clothes, sat at the desk, saw the papers, the files, the tasks. She felt fear, but also something like pride. At night she called Pamela. "I got it. I knew you would," Pamela said. "I just didn't know it would be so fast." Sarah laughed, a light laugh she hadn't had in a long time. "Me neither." She kept working, kept studying, started saving more money, planning a new place to live, helped the elderly lady when she could, cooked for two, paid on time. It was simple, but it was hers. More important than anything. She laughed again, and this time, without guilt. But not everyone accepted her leaving quietly. Charles was the first to react. When he learned Sarah had left the house for good, he was furious. Not out of missing her or concern, but wounded pride. He didn't accept that someone just left, especially someone like her, someone he never truly considered family. He filed a lawsuit against Sarah, accusing her of abandoning the home. In the claim, he included the return of some belongings, a worn leather purse, a simple cell phone, and a coat she had taken when leaving. She left without notice, left everything behind, took items that weren't hers, Charles argued to the lawyer. "They're personal items," the lawyer said hesitantly. "Are you sure you want to file a case over this?" "I am. I want to make it clear she didn't leave as a victim. She disrespected this house." The summons arrived to Sarah on an ordinary morning. She opened the envelope calmly, sitting at the kitchen table of the woman sheltering her. She read every line without despair, took a deep breath, then went to Pamela's house with the paper in hand. "He sued me," she said, handing over the sheet. Pamela read silently. "I knew he wouldn't let it go. They want me to return a purse, an old phone, a coat. They don't want the things, Sarah. They want control. They want you to feel wrong." Sarah nodded slowly. "I won't back down. Not this time." With the money she'd saved, she looked for a lawyer recommended by a co-worker. He was a simple man, straightforward, without frills. He listened carefully and said firmly, "Do you have proof?" "I have messages, copies of daily tasks, notes left by Sophia." "A witness," Sarah replied. "Who's the witness?" "Pamela, a neighbor. She saw everything, heard me when no one else did." Days later, they sat in the lawyer's small office to organize the papers. Pamela accompanied her. "Are you willing to tell everything?" the lawyer asked. "I am. I have nothing left to hide," Sarah said. At the hearing, Sarah kept her firm posture. She spoke clearly, told of the humiliations, the suffocating silences, the marriage that turned into duty, spoke of the betrayal, the lack of voice, the control disguised as normality. Pamela testified, confirmed Sarah's condition, how she was treated, how she seemed to fade more each day. Charles tried to keep his usual authoritative tone. "She left without saying anything. She was never abused. She had a bed, food, clean clothes." "Is that care or control?" the judge replied, looking over his glasses. "What you described is not life. It's prison disguised as a home." At the end of the hearing, the ruling was clear. Sarah owed nothing to that family. There was no abandonment, no theft. There was freedom regained. "Case dismissed," the judge said, "and I hope you live in peace from now on." Sarah left the courthouse with steady steps, didn't look back, didn't look for the faces she once tried to please. Pamela waited outside, sitting on a stone bench. "It's over," Sarah said. "Now it begins," Pamela replied. She never returned to the neighborhood where she lived with Timothy. Over time, she changed her address, rented a small apartment downtown. It was simple, with white walls and used furniture, but everything there was calm. She no longer had to walk in silence. The hum of the fridge at night was familiar. The smell of coffee in the morning came without hurry. She could leave a book on the table without anyone moving it. It was little, but it was freedom. She kept working, first at the accounting firm, then at a bigger office. Took night courses, studied hard, passed a public service exam as a clerk at a documentation center. The pay was better, the days more structured. 2 years later, she was promoted. Nothing came easy, but nothing was given, and that made all the difference. One day, she wrote an article for a local newspaper. She didn't name names. She told her story with coldness and firmness, spoke of the woman she was, the house where she couldn't exist, the silence that nearly swallowed her. Signed with her full name, didn't apologize for anything. The piece circulated among city readers. It gained attention, comments. Some praised her courage, others her care with words. But one letter in particular arrived weeks later. It was from Timothy. "I read your article, thought a lot. I think I was slow to understand what I lost. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I regret it." Sarah folded the letter carefully, put it in a drawer, and never replied. The responsibility to deal with his guilt was no longer hers. Charles, aged, lost his stance over time. His firm voice turned to muttering. Long days became filled with silence. Now real, not imposed. People stopped visiting him. The respect he demanded was never affection, and without control, he was left alone. Sophia stopped going out, stopped taking care of the house. The plants withered, the garden dried up, the perfect house lost its order. The woman who never had a choice became a shadow in her own home. Pamela, on the other hand, became a constant presence. She and Sarah shared their days. Birthdays with simple cake, afternoons with hot tea and quiet laughter. When Pamela's health wavered, Sarah cared for her like she cared for her own mother. In return, she received a kind of affection she had never felt. It wasn't obligation. It was a bond. "You're different," Pamela said one morning as they looked at the sky from the window. "For the better?" Sarah asked. "For who you always were, just now you let yourself show." Sarah never looked back again. She moved forward with the strength of someone who finally knew her own worth. Everything she had lived was no longer pain, it was memory, and she was whole at last. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.